Namaskar, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Namrata Singh and you are watching Perspective. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar addressed the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, delivering India's message with clarity and conviction. He described the United Nations as gridlocked and in urgent need of reform. Summarizing the UN's history and its contemporary challenges, he highlighted conflicts in West Asia and Ukraine, slow progress on SDGs and pressing issues in energy and food security. He also warned of tariff, volatility and uncertain market access as current challenges. Without naming Pakistan, Dr. Jaishankar noted that one neighbouring country has become an epicenter of terrorism, tracing majority international attacks to it. He cited the recent Pahalgam tragedy where 26 innocent tourists lost their lives, underscoring the global impact of terrorism. Dr. Jaishankar flagged the gap between climate commitments and action, questioning the prospects for climate justice. He emphasized Bharat's three guiding principles: self-reliance, self-protection and self-confidence as the pillars shaping its approach to the contemporary world. So to discuss this and much more, I'm joined by an astute panel of guests. I'm pleased to welcome two distinguished guests joining us virtually. Former Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar. Ambassador, thank you for joining us and welcome to Sansad TV. I'm also delighted to welcome Dr. Sriram Chaulia, Professor and Dean, Jindal School of International Affairs and Director General of Jindal India Institute. He's also a prominent voice on international affairs. Dr. Chaulia, thank you for joining us and welcome to Sansad TV.
Thank you.
Ambassador, let me begin with you. In his address at the United Nations, Dr. Jaishankar delivered India's message with clarity and conviction. He highlighted the UN's contemporary challenges, calling it gridlocked and in urgent need of reform. So stating that an objective report card will show that the UN is in state of crisis. So Ambassador, your thoughts on this and how do you see the role of the UN evolving in today's complex world?
Yes, thank you very much, Namrata, for having me on the show. You're very right. I think Dr. Jaishankar, he delivered the address on behalf of the state of India, on behalf of India as a seasoned statesman, global statesman. He did not, he had a macro view of what the United Nations has been able to do over the last 80 years since it was established. What are the challenges it faces, and also providing what are the solutions for the appropriate, for the streamlined and effective functioning of the United Nations. And in that context, he basically provided what India has been able to do, what India has, how it has grown over the last 10 years, and how it can contribute to the functioning of multilateralism and also to the United Nations. If I could add the three basic principles, the three basic challenges that Dr. Jaishankar identified. One was in terms of the terrorism that is afflicting the whole world. And then there are double standards. Without naming Pakistan, he referred that one of the countries has become the epicenter of terror, one of our neighbors. And it has basically used terrorism as an instrument of its foreign policy. And in fact, most of the terrorists and terrorist organizations which are identified under the 1267 Committee of the United Nations belong to that particular country. And he said that the whole world has to come together to deal with this scourge of terrorism. And because this is a country that glorifies terror, and so the countries which do not take action against it will face the impact of terrorism upon themselves. So he was very clear, very direct. Two other aspects very quickly, if I could mention. One is in terms of the reform of multilateralism, because multilateralism is not delivering. We have seen that there are wars raging in Russia, between Russia and Ukraine, that has gone on for the last more than 3 years, 7 months. And then there is also the war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas, that will be marking the 2 years of its completion in another week or so. So there, the main purpose of the UN Security Council was to ensure peace and security in the world. And one of the fundamental reasons why it has not been able to achieve that is because the United Nations has not moved with the times, and it is imperative to reform the UN Security Council and other agencies of the United Nations. And the last point, very briefly, in terms of the interest of the Global South. The Global South has been ignored, and so the world needs to come together. The impact of these wars and all the other challenges, climate change, etc., the countries of the Global South are the worst affected by it. So we really need to come together to alleviate the suffering of the Global South countries.
Definitely. You know, as you mentioned that UN has not moved with time. So Dr. Chaulia, you know, External Affairs Minister also called for the expansion of both permanent and non-permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council. Though UNGA has expanded in these 80 years, but you know, UNSC has not expanded since 1965. And India has been actively pushing for a permanent seat for more than 3 decades, if I believe. So, you know, besides India, several other countries are also advocating for reform. So for our viewers, if you could explain the major reasons and roadblocks behind the lack of progress on UNSC expansion.
Yes, Namrita. Firstly, it's procedural. So the main roadblock to expanding Security Council and to changing its makeup is procedural, because the rule says it requires 2/3 majority of the General Assembly, which many countries like India can easily muster, but also the consent of all the 5 permanent members.
Right.
And all of whom wield the veto power. Now, among the P5 countries, we know most of them are in favor of India's membership, but China has never unequivocally supported it, and it is a little bit wishy-washy about this matter. They say that we are interested in reforms, but they have been backing what is called the Coffee Club, or Uniting for Consensus. It's a bloc of countries, of a few dozen of them, who are backed with Chinese support, and they have been trying to delay the intergovernmental negotiation process. So there is a whole procedural aspect and also political aspect, where many countries are unwilling to bring in new members because they say that if you get in, then we should also get in. So the G4, which is the most, I would say, prominent contenders for new permanent seats, India, Japan, Germany, and Brazil, they have been pushing for a long time, for decades. But what is happening is, you know, there are other countries that are not willing to let them in. So China will not accept Japan or India.
Okay.
Brazil does not have consensus with its own Latin American neighbors, some of whom say that we deserve to be there if you are going to be there. And there is a consensus within the African Union to nominate members, but it's still not absolutely clear as to who will be the 1 or 2 African seat holders. And you know, with Germany, because there's already France in the EU, in the UN Security Council as a permanent member from 1945. The question is, should there be a separate seat for Germany or for the entire EU? I mean, there are a lot of unsettled questions on this matter.
Okay.
And what's happening is that countries are trying to the negotiations to move forward.
Yes, there was some network issue.
If you permit, I'll just, you know, since Dr. Chaulia's, you know, connectivity was slightly disturbed, if I may add just one word.
Sure, sir. Go ahead.
While agreeing with everything that Dr. Chaulia has mentioned, you know, basically, I think as far as India is concerned, the one stumbling block is China. Because China earlier used to, as Dr. Chaulia has said, used to put up other countries, you know, there's the Coffee Club, there's Italy, there's Pakistan, there's Argentina, etc. But otherwise now it refuses to have a text-based negotiation. Because in all these negotiations, you have to have a text. You cannot speak, continue to speak in generalities for, you know, and we have been speaking in generalities and making political statements for the last 30 years, as you have said. Now, we do have a text in front of us, but China does not want to go take that route. And it always says that, this is not the time, you have to have patience, you have to have strategic patience. The African countries will lose out if we go into this. And that is why you would have seen that Dr. Jaishankar specifically, while talking about the expansion of the UN Security Council, he specifically referred to Africa. And he said that the injustice of Africa, that has to be removed. We, of course, removed the injustice of Africa when we made the African Union a member of the G20. But I think in this context also, as Dr. Cholia has said, African representation, both in the permanent and non-permanent members, is essential.
As you were mentioning about the terrorism, so India has highlighted the issue of terrorism on several global platforms. And at UNGA, Dr. Jaishankar highlighted it as the shared global threat. And he said that India has faced this challenge since independence with the neighbor he described as an epicentre of terrorism. He also stressed the need to choke terror financing and called for deeper international cooperation. So, Ambassador, these assertive stances highlight India's commitment to combating terrorism. What are your thoughts on India's approach, and how can the global community respond more effectively to this?
Yeah, thank you very much, Namrata, for that question. And you're very right. What India has called out to the world is that there should be zero tolerance to terrorism. And India has made that very clear that as far as we are concerned, we have zero tolerance to terrorism, and that is why we moved to avenging the deaths of 26 of our nationals, 25 Indian and 1 Nepalese, on the 22nd of April. And he also made it very clear that we will, in future, any terrorist attack will be taken as an act of war, and we will act after both the perpetrators as well as the supporters. And he encouraged the whole world also to come together, not have a hypocritical approach, not have double standards. And because if they do, then they will also be affected by that. As far as India specifically is concerned, he said we are not going to be discouraged by this nuclear overhang or nuclear, the threat of nuclear blackmail that, this country is using. So I think India's position has been very clear that we will continue to safeguard the security and the well-being of our people, and we will take whatever action is required if there is any terrorist attack against India. And he encouraged the whole world also to do the same thing.
Definitely, as Jaishankar said that, world needs to come together as far as terrorism is concerned. Dr. Cholia, I would like to ask a similar question to you as well. Dr. Jaishankar reiterates India's zero tolerance for terrorism, saying that we remain determined to protect our people and secure their interests at home and abroad. So, considering India's long-standing experience in confronting cross-border terrorism, how do you see the role of multilateral institutions and global partners in effectively addressing this challenge?
Yeah, I mean, the way he framed it was that India is not only defending itself, but it's actually protecting the world from a scourge of radical jihadist extremism and terrorism. So it's quite clear that he was positioning India as a provider of security, not only for itself, but for the region and the world. So multilateral institutions have a special role to play, because that is where you can build consensus and create coalitions of the willing. And we have, moved this issue to the center stage. I remember during our non-permanent seat, we had also brought UNSC members to Mumbai, to the site of the 26/11 terrorist attacks, for them to see for themselves and to hear from the victims who are still suffering from the agonizing loss of their loved ones. So clearly we are prioritizing these issues so that they remain on the top of the agenda, and so that there is greater will and understanding for India's own actions.
Right.
When Dr. Jaishankar was talking about the fact that there is one country which is harboring and sponsoring and doing this as a state policy, and we need to do something. And he was talking about India's resolute actions. You could hear the General Assembly breaking into an applause. Many people understand the Indian point of view. And I think this is how we build these coalitions and strategic partnerships. Also, many of our partners, we have strong counterterrorism content in most of these relationships. And we do joint intelligence sharing, joint military exercises, defense diplomacy with member countries of the UN. And that is how we are able to keep, this on the this issue on the top of the agenda. Because otherwise what happens is many countries try to see this whole thing as the India-Pakistan dispute over, Kashmir, or as a territorial issue.
Definitely.
But we are now saying that this is the main issue, and we are trying to, change the narrative, because the Pakistanis always come to the UN General Assembly with their lies. And what Dr. Jaishankar did was strong rebuttal with facts on the ground as to what has happened and he's also told the international community, which is there in the UNGA, that we reserve the right to take very strong actions in the future too. So what he's saying is we are laying the ground, the diplomatic ground, for continued Operation Sindoor, or whatever we want to call it, going into the future, so that the international community knows that there is a case. Ultimately it's about narrative building also. It's not only coalition building. So both these things we could do through Dr. Jaishankar's address and his special attention to this matter.
Okay. Ambassador, Dr. Jaishankar also called for an end to hostilities in Ukraine and Gaza, as you were also mentioning earlier. So, that emphasizing that even countries not directly involved feel the impact of these conflicts. He also expressed India's support for any initiative that helps restore peace. So, how do you assess India's role in promoting dialogue and peace in such global conflicts?
Yeah, basically, India has been engaged in trying to provide, some communication between the two sides, whether it is, India is one of the very few countries which has excellent relations, both with Russia, as also with Ukraine, as also with the Western countries. So India was, possibly the first country, when this conflict had just then started, that in September of 2022, when Prime Minister Modi met President Putin in Samarkand on the sidelines of the SCO meeting, he told him that this is not an era of war, that the issue should be settled through dialogue and diplomacy. And he has continued to reiterate that on many occasions and stated that no solutions for any disputes can be found on the battlefield. It will have to come through negotiations. And that is what he has been advancing. He has, whenever he has visited Moscow or spoken to President Putin, he has advanced the cause of dialogue. He also traveled, took that train journey from Poland to Kiev and visited President Zelensky there. He also spoke to President Zelensky recently. And I think this has sent out a very strong and a very positive message to the European countries, those who are interested in bringing this war to a close. And India, Dr. Jaishankar also mentioned that India is willing to play its role in bringing this war to a close. But even we see that over the last 3 years, 7 months, whenever there has been any call upon India to step forward, to provide, to bring the two countries together, whether it was on the issue of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, or it was in terms of providing the export of grains from Ukraine via the Black Sea, India was able to step forward and India was able to contribute in a positive manner. And right now also, India has expressed its readiness and willingness that it will come to the aid whenever its help, its good offices are required in India.
Correct. Dr. Jaishankar also highlighted pressing global challenges, including conflicts in West Asia and Ukraine, and slow progress on SDGs and critical issues in climate, energy and food security. So, Dr. Chaulia, how would you assess the UN's current effectiveness in addressing these challenges?
Well, it is struggling. Dr. Jaishankar especially mentioned that on the three pillars of the United Nations, peace and security, socio-economic development, human rights, there is a significant regression in the international environment. You can see wars raging, and we have spoken about it. You can see since the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war, after the blowback effects of it on the global south in terms of the sustainable development goals, most of the countries which were on target to meet them by 2030 are now struggling and have fallen back. Poverty levels have risen. Just to mention one, glaring aspect of the SDGs. There are many others, and rampant human rights abuses continue in many parts of the world with impunity. So, essentially, as a big democracy and as a great, provider of public goods to the world, India, he was saying that we are doing our job, but the UN collectively needs to step up to the plate and do its job. And this is, of course, linked to the reforms. An unreformed UN cannot be an effective UN. And so I think that is our message. Unless we implement major structural changes and reforms and seriously work towards making the UN more legitimate and representative, it is not going to be able to solve any of these problems. And the UN, people are disillusioned and people are highly critical of the UN these days, and rightfully so. And I think this is the time, 80 years of the United Nations. This is the, a major milestone, but it's nothing great to celebrate. I mean, rather we are asking for urgent changes. And I think our voice is being heard. I think we are part of, like I said, coalition building, and hopefully we will be able to bring about a bigger push for reforms in the 9th decade of the United Nations.
Definitely. And climate change is also one of the major pressing global issue. So Ambassador, the minister also warned about creative accounting in climate commitments and questioned climate justice. So, according to you, how can India and the UN push for accountability and meaningful actions on climate change?
Again, basically the response is that we work with like-minded parties. We work with like-minded countries.
Right.
And show the way forward by our own example. India's example is a very sterling one. It is very inspiring because India is the only country out of the G20 which has met its Paris Accord commitments. No other country has been able to do that. And we have set very ambitious targets for ourselves. Whether it is moving from, of course, coal and fossil fuels will continue to be the mainstay because India is at that stage, about $3,000 per capita income and providing energy to the 1.4 billion people. So coal and fossil fuels will continue to be there, but we have made a very strong push in terms of getting renewables, on focusing on renewables. So by 2030, we had mentioned that 500 gigawatts of energy will be through renewables, but we are going to achieve that well before that. And in the case of electric vehicles and so many others. And this is what he said, that if there is even a denial, if there's not even an acceptance that climate change is a reality, then how will you be able to provide climate justice to the countries? And, when we are talking about the climate change, of course, it is the developing countries that are at the receiving end. Because when the climate is changing, weather is changing, there is the ocean levels are rising, and they will basically impact upon island countries, whether in Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean. It is, where the crops are going to fail.
We are also seeing so many natural disasters.
Indeed. And that is what also he mentioned about the humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, more floods, more forest fires, more droughts. And the countries that are at the receiving end would be the developing countries, the global south. And that is what we really need to fight against. And that can be done only by the world coming together and pooling in their resources to deal with this challenge and to provide climate justice to the countries of the global south.
Definitely, world needs to come together to address this global pressing issue. And this question is for both my guests, Ambassador as well as Dr. Chaulia. You know, Jaishankar emphasized Bharat's three guiding principles: self-reliance, self-protection and self-confidence as key pillars shaping India's approach to the contemporary world. So, sir, how do you see these principles influencing India's foreign policy and its role on the global stage? Ambassador?
Yeah, so very right. I think these are the three principles. These are the three guiding lights that Dr. Jaishankar put. And he said, we have already started on this, you know, whether it is Atmanirbharta, that is self-reliance. We have been working on that for quite some time, and it has been giving us good results. And Atmanirbharta also goes in with as far as Atma Suraksha is concerned, that is in terms of self-security, self-protection of our people. Because again, we have been focusing on greater manufacturing of the defense equipment and making ourselves more self-sufficient and not relying, because this is what we have seen. Countries like in the European Union, NATO countries, Japan, South Korea, they are very dependent upon the United States. And that is why they find themselves in a corner when the United States is changing its position. And the third, of course, is Atma Samman, the self-dignity, self-respect. And that also we have started working on it, and we know that there is much greater focus now, Namrata, on recognizing our own history, our own icons, our own leaders, and taking pride in our own culture. So what there was, we got freedom from political freedom, but also economic freedom and intellectual freedom. That is what is required, getting away from intellectual slavery, as the Britishers, as the colonizers had tried to inculcate in us that, you know, we are the superior people. That is why we are fit to rule over you, and you have not been able to achieve anything. You have always been defeated by foreign powers, so, you know, we have a right to rule over you. So I think he made it out very clear, and this is, you know, a project that has already started in India, and it is doing extremely well in India. And of course, we need to take it forward to realize our own potential and our own place as far as the global community of nations is concerned.
Okay, Dr. Chaulia, your comments. How do you see these principles influencing India's foreign policy and its role on the global stage?
You know, I'm quite intrigued by his use of the three selves in the UN, you know, because the UN is supposed to be, you know, promoting international cooperation and interdependence and liberal values and all those things. But instead, what he's basically saying, a rules-based order, liberal international order is over. And we are very realistic. Therefore, we have to go back to self-reliance, you know, self-security, self-dignity. And essentially, we are living in a different world from even 10, 15 years ago. And India is a rising power. So we have the capabilities to be self-reliant, to protect ourselves and to protect our dignity. And that's what he's showing, you know, a rising power, a would-be great power or a leading power in the world. So we have the will, the political will, and also the capabilities to defend our interests and the world stage. And I think it's a clear statement that there are limits to how much the interdependence and the, liberal order can sustain, So we are prepared for a much uglier world. And unfortunately, the failure of the UN is the reflection of this uglier world.
Definitely.
And we are in a way, bracing for, a more difficult world order with self-confidence.
Right. So as Dr. Jaishankar pointed out, and as our guests have highlighted, that these are certainly challenging times for the international community. Many of our assumptions and expectations no longer hold. So in such circumstances, it is imperative to stay strong, stand firm, and deepen friendships. With that, we wrap up this edition of Perspective. Thank you, Ambassador and Dr. Chaulia, for sharing your insights. And to our viewers, thank you for watching Sansad TV.
To watch
watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.